Ilara Vance felt the spray of filthy water hit her full force. A luxury car had intentionally drenched her in mud. The driver, Victoria Davenport, just laughed and sped away. She had no idea that the woman she'd just humiliated was the only person on Earth who could save her $3 million fortune. It had rained earlier. Puddles of murky water stained the asphalt. Ilara was walking carefully along the curb. She was in her best clothes, simple but clean, for an urgent interview. A white Porsche appeared, moving fast. The engine roared. Instead of avoiding the puddle, the car steered directly toward it. The wheels plunged into the mire. A wave of dirty water exploded, soaking Ilara from head to toe. The car didn't stop. Through the rearview mirror, Ilara saw Victoria's triumphant smirk before she vanished around the curve. People at the bus stop stared, shocked. An old man shook his head in disapproval. Nobody did anything. The white Porsche was a shield of impunity. Ilara's humiliation was swift, anonymous and absolute. She stood frozen, shivering from cold and rage, covered in a film of grime. But she had to keep going. The interview was her only chance. The mansion was at the end of this very street. When she reached the imposing gate, the security guard stopped her immediately. "You can't come in here looking like that," he said with disgust. The obstacle was the wall of that fortress, and the mud on her body was proof she didn't belong. Suddenly, a black car pulled up behind her. Dr. Miles Corbin, a renowned botanist, got out in a hurry. "Ilara! Is that you? We've been waiting!" He ignored the filth, ignored the guard. He opened the gate for her himself. Victoria appeared at the mansion's front door, impatient. "Dr. Corbin, where is the specialist you told me?" Her voice died. Her eyes widened. It was the woman from the street, the woman she had drenched in mud. Victoria's smirk vanished. Ilara, filthy and humiliated, was now on her doorstep, and she was her only hope. The silence at the mansion's entrance was heavy, dense. Victoria stared at Ilara's mud-caked figure as if she were seeing a ghost. The woman she had metaphorically crushed with the wheels of her car was the expert. The irony was so brutal it was suffocating. Dr. Corbin was the first to break the silence. "Victoria, this is Ilara Vance, the botanist I mentioned. She's the best there is." His voice was firm, an introduction that was also a command. Victoria straightened her posture. The shock gave way to her usual arrogance, an armor against the impossible. "This woman? Doctor, is this some kind of joke? Look at the state of her. I will not have her in my house." Her eyes shot daggers at Ilara, trying to diminish her, trying to rewrite a reality where she didn't need this person. But Ilara didn't shrink. She met Victoria's gaze, and for the first time the millionaire felt a chill. There was no fear in those eyes, only a sharp, cutting calm. "You have two choices," Ilara said, her voice quiet but echoing with unexpected power. "You can leave me out here and watch your $3 million orchid turn to dust, or you can let me inside and allow me to save it." Dr. Corbin intervened. "Victoria, we don't have time for this. Every minute counts. The flower won't make it to tomorrow." The word tomorrow hit Victoria like a stone. Tomorrow was the auction. Tomorrow meant cameras, investors, the entire world watching. Swallowing her pride, which tasted like poison, she gave in. "Fine, come in," she spat the words, "but go straight to the greenhouse and don't touch anything on your way." She turned to a startled maid. "Get an apron for her." Ilara walked through the marble hall, leaving a subtle trail of damp earth, each step a small desecration in Victoria's sanctuary. The greenhouse was another world, a cathedral of glass and steel, its climate controlled with surgical precision, and in the center, on its deathbed, was the black dragon. Its petals, which should have been a deep, dark velvet, were dull and stained with grey. The flower seemed to be giving up, exhausted from the fight. Victoria stood at a distance, her arms crossed. "Well, are you going to work some magic? Or just stand there?" The taunt was childish, a last-ditch effort to maintain control. Ilara ignored it. She approached the glass dome protecting the orchid and examined it from every angle. Her concentration was absolute. I need latex gloves, fine-tipped tweezers, a spray bottle with distilled water, and a magnifying lamp with an ultraviolet light. The list of specific items, spoken without hesitation, silenced Victoria. Dr. Corbin rushed to gather everything. With the tools in hand, Ilara began to work. Her movements were like a surgeon's. Delicate, precise, efficient. She lifted one of the withered leaves with the tweezers, examining its underside with the UV light. The rot was nearly invisible to the naked eye, a fungal web spreading silently. "Incredible," Dr. Corbin whispered, watching. "Phomopsis usually attacks the roots first. This strain is different. It's more aggressive." Ilara nodded, her eyes fixed on the plant. "It was genetically modified," she said. "The black dragon. It's spectacular, but it lacks the natural defenses of its ancestors. It's a fragile beauty, created in a lab." Victoria shifted impatiently. "I'm not paying you for a biology lesson. Just fix it." Ilara finally turned to her. The calm on her face was more intimidating than any shout. "First, you aren't paying me. We haven't discussed my terms yet. Second, if you want me to save your $3 million investment, you will remain silent and let me work." Victoria turned pale. No one had ever spoken to her like that, especially not in her own home. She opened her mouth to retort, but Dr. Corbin cut her off. "Ilara's right, Victoria. Let her work." He turned to Ilara, clear admiration on his face. "Your knowledge is remarkable. Where did you study, if I may ask?" Ilara sprayed a fine mist of distilled water over a petal. "I earned my master's at Wageningen University in the Netherlands. My thesis was on fungal pathogens in rare hybrid orchids. The university's name, the most prestigious in the world for agricultural sciences, hung in the air." Dr. Corbin's eyes widened. An old memory sparked. "Wait, Ilara Vance. Did you publish a paper on apical necrosis in Phalaenopsis? I read that paper. It was brilliant. What happened? Why did you—" He stopped, realizing the question was too personal. Ilara gave a small, sad smile. "Life happened, doctor. My father got sick. I had to come back to the States. I sold everything to pay for his treatment. When he passed, I had nothing left, just my knowledge and my hands." The revelation landed like a bomb in the greenhouse. The mud-stained gardener wasn't just anyone. She was a brilliant academic, a mind that Dr. Corbin himself, an icon in the field, admired. The effect on Victoria was immediate and devastating. The foundation of her arrogance crumbled. She wasn't dealing with an underling. She was dealing with an equal, perhaps even a superior, whom fate had temporarily placed at a disadvantage. And she, Victoria, in her blindness, had humiliated her in the lowest way possible. She stammered, speechless. The auction, the money, her reputation, everything was in the hands of the woman she tried to break with a splash of muddy water. Dr. Corbin, sensing the seismic shift in the power dynamic, focused on Ilara. "What do you need, Ilara?" "Anything. We'll get it." Ilara wiped the tip of the tweezers on a cloth. She stood up, her body still dirty, but her posture was erect, unshakable. She looked directly at Victoria, her gaze cutting through all the layers of wealth and power. "The fungus has already spread to the plant's vascular system. A topical treatment won't be enough. I need to create a systemic antifungal, and I need to do it now." She paused, letting the weight of her next words settle. "I need access to your late husband's laboratory." A chill ran down Victoria's spine. The lab. The place was locked, untouched since her husband's death, a forbidden sanctuary. "That's impossible," she whispered. "No one goes in there." Ilara didn't flinch. "Then your orchid dies." "Impossible!" The word escaped Victoria's lips as a fragile whisper, but the refusal was hard as steel. Her eyes were wide, fixed on Ilara, but she seemed to be seeing a ghost. "That laboratory, it's closed. Sealed. No one, absolutely no one, goes in there. Those were my late husband's orders." The lie was clumsy, a flimsy excuse for a terror that was almost palpable. Dr. Corbin stepped forward, his voice gentle, trying to breach the wall of panic Victoria was building around herself. "Victoria, please, be reasonable. Arthur's equipment was the most advanced in the country. If there's a chance, it's in there. It's what he would have wanted. He loved that orchid more than anything." And the mention of her husband's name made Victoria recoil as if she'd been struck. "Don't you dare say his name! You don't know anything!" she shrieked, her composure finally shattering into 1,000 pieces. "You two, conspiring against me in my own house!" She turned on Ilara, her face twisted into a mask of fury and contempt. "Is that what you want, is it? Money? Fine." She grabbed her phone, her fingers trembling over the screen. "I'll wire it right now. $100,000. Is that enough? 200,000, just so you'll leave. Disappear from my house and my life. I'll call Europe, fly in a real specialist." The offer was an insult, a desperate attempt to reassert the power she felt slipping through her fingers. Ilara remained motionless. She didn't even glance at the phone. She just shook her head, slowly. "Your money can't stop a fungus, Victoria, and it can't buy time. In a few hours there will be nothing left for any specialist to save." Every calm word from Ilara was another nail in the coffin of Victoria's authority. Defeated, humiliated in her own greenhouse, the millionaire did the only thing she had left. She ran. With a cry of frustration, she turned and slammed the glass door behind her, leaving Ilara and the doctor in the tense, humid silence with the dying plant. Victoria didn't stop in the hall. She stormed through the mansion's lavish corridors like a hurricane, her mind a vortex of panic. The lab. That place could not be opened, ever. There were secrets in there, secrets buried under a layer of dust and grief, secrets that could destroy her far more completely than a lost auction. She reached her control room, a high-tech office from which she managed every aspect of the estate. The door sealed and locked behind her. On the large monitor, security camera feeds showed the greenhouse. There they were, Ilara and Dr. Corbin, talking, examining the orchid, planning. They looked so calm, so in control, the control that should have been hers. A poisonous thought began to form in her mind. If she couldn't win, no one would. If the plant died, it wouldn't be her fault. It would be a freak accident. An unavoidable tragedy. Ilara couldn't be the hero if there was nothing left to save. With grim determination, she opened the mansion's environmental control system. She located the greenhouse parameters. The temperature was set to 72 degrees Fahrenheit, humidity at 78%, perfect for the orchid, disastrous for her. With trembling fingers, she typed a new command, a manual override. Temperature 82 degrees, humidity 90%. The system asked for confirmation. The excessive heat and humidity would accelerate the fungal growth exponentially. It would cook the flower in its own glass cocoon. Victoria hit confirm. On the monitor, she watched. The game had changed. She was no longer trying to save the flower. She was trying to destroy it. Inside the greenhouse, the air began to shift. It grew heavy, suffocating. Droplets of condensation started forming on the inside of the glass. A small red alarm flashed on the orchid dome's control panel. A low, almost inaudible beep. "What's that?" said Dr. Corbin, frowning. "The temperature is rising." Ilara touched the glass of the dome. It was warm. "She's not trying to stop us," Ilara said, a cold realization in her voice. "She's trying to destroy the plant." Just then, the greenhouse door opened softly. An older woman in a uniform entered. It was Maria, the head housekeeper who had worked in the home for over 30 years. She carried a tray with 2 glasses of water. Her eyes were frightened, but there was a spark of resolve in them. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, placing the tray on a counter. "Mrs. Davenport, she's locked herself in the control room. She always does that when she's about to do something terrible." Maria looked at the dying orchid, and then at Ilara. She had loved her late employer, Arthur, and she hated what Victoria had become. "Mr. Arthur once told me that science must always serve the truth," she said. And he knew what his wife was like. With trembling hands, Maria pulled an access card from her apron pocket. It was different, older. He gave this to me in case of an emergency. It's the master keycard for the laboratory. He said I would know when to use it. She held the card out to Ilara. It was an act of rebellion, an act of faith. Ilara looked at the card in Maria's hand, then at Dr. Corbin, whose face showed a mixture of shock and agreement. The decision was made in that instant. This was no longer about saving a flower for a rich woman. This was about honoring a good man's legacy, and it was about stopping a cruel woman who would rather destroy beauty than admit defeat. Ilara took the card. "Thank you, Maria," she said, her voice firm. "Let's find the truth." The access card was cool and smooth in Ilara's hand, an impersonal piece of plastic, yet it carried the weight of a profound trust. The feel of it in her palm transported her to another time, another garden, to a warmth she hadn't felt in a very long time. The sunlight was golden, filtered through the leaves of an old maple tree. She was 12, and the dirt under her fingernails was her greatest joy. Her father, a man with broad shoulders and an easy smile, was beside her. He watched her try to transplant a delicate jasmine seedling, her small hands clumsy. He knelt beside her. The smell of earth and sweat was the smell of home. "Easy now, my girl," he said, his voice deep and gentle. "The earth doesn't like to be rushed. It likes respect." He helped her firm the plant in its new pot. "See," he continued, wiping a leaf with his thumb, "the earth is the most honest thing in the world. You plant a jasmine seed, it gives you the scent of jasmine. You care for it, it gives you flowers. It never lies." He paused, his gaze turning more serious. "People, Ilara, people can lie. Some will try to sling mud at you, hoping you'll never grow. They'll try to tell you that you don't belong in the beautiful gardens, but you can't ever forget where your roots come from." He then pulled an object wrapped in soft cloth from his pocket. It was a small gardening trowel, but the handle and blade were made of an old worn silver, tarnished by time and use, the symbol of his family. "This was my father's, and his father's before him," he said, placing the trowel in her hand. The metal felt heavy, real. "The hands that held this were always honest. Remember that. Let your work be your truth. No lie, no cruelty can ever choke a root that's truly strong." The image of her father's face dissolved. The warmth of the afternoon sun gave way to the humid, superheated air of the greenhouse. The silver trowel transformed back into the plastic access card. Her father's words echoed in her mind, not as a memory, but as an instruction. Her roots were strong, and she was about to show Victoria the strength that came from a truth planted long ago. "She won't let us get there," said Dr. Corbin, sweat beading on his forehead. The air in the greenhouse was becoming a hot, sticky soup. She must be watching the main cameras. Maria, the housekeeper, shook her head. Years of silent service had made her an expert in the house's secret geography. "There is another way," she whispered, her voice filled with urgency. "Through the service corridors. They have no cameras. Mr. Arthur insisted on it. He used to say the staff's privacy was as important as his own." She led them out of the greenhouse through a discreet door hidden behind a row of ferns. The contrast was immediate. They left the opulent stage and entered the backstage. The hallways were narrow, painted a functional white, lit by fluorescent bulbs. The air was cooler here, but the tension followed them like a shadow. They moved in silence. An unlikely team united against a common enemy. Maria in front, the keeper of the house's secrets, Ilara in the middle, the scientist on a rescue mission, and Dr. Corbin behind them, the guardian of ethics, his face a mask of concern. The laboratory was in an isolated wing of the mansion. The door was brushed steel, imposing and cold. Beside it, a card reader blinked a small red light. There was no lock, no handle. It was the entrance to a vault. Ilara took a deep breath, her father's words echoing in her mind. She raised her hand, which was trembling slightly, and swiped the card Maria had given her. There was a soft click, and the red light turned green. A nearly inaudible hiss sounded as the door's pressure seal released. Slowly, the heavy steel door slid aside, revealing the darkness within. They stepped inside, and the door closed behind them, plunging them into a profound silence. The silence of a place frozen in time. Maria found the light switch. The light that flickered on was white, clinical, revealing a sanctuary of science. Everything was covered in a thin layer of dust, but underneath it, Arthur Davenport's laboratory was in perfect order. Vials and beakers lined the shelves, complex equipment rested under plastic covers, and a faint smell of ozone and chemicals hung in the air. It was the legacy of a meticulous and passionate man. Ilara felt a surge of respect. "I need a sample of the sap from an infected leaf," she said, already moving with purpose. "I'll use the mass spectrometer to isolate the fungus's protein signature. It's the only way to know which agent to use." While Dr. Corbin prepared a slide with the small sample they'd brought, Ilara powered up the machines. Screens came to life, humming softly, waking from a long slumber. Time was their enemy. Every minute, the orchid was cooking in the greenhouse. She worked with a speed and precision that left Dr. Corbin amazed. Her mind was like the lab around her, organized, efficient, brilliant. In minutes, she had the result. A complex sequence appeared on the screen. "There it is," she said, pointing. "It's a specific enzyme the fungus uses to digest cellulose. If I can neutralize it." Her eyes scanned the shelves of reagents. "I need a solution of cycloperoxolamine, but I have to stabilize it with a ketone polymer. Arthur must have it here somewhere." She moved to a large metal cabinet at the back of the lab where the rarest compounds were stored. The drawers were meticulously labeled. Cyanides, cyclosporine, here. She pulled open a drawer, but her hand brushed against a poorly balanced metal file box on the shelf above. The box crashed to the floor with a heavy thud, scattering its contents. It wasn't vials of chemicals, it was papers, dozens of documents. "Damn it," she muttered, kneeling to gather them. That's when she saw it. On top of the pile was a thick sealed envelope with the words, "My true last will, to be opened only by my attorney," written in Arthur's elegant handwriting. Beside it were copies of a second will, the official version, with a signature that at first glance looked identical, but it wasn't. There were also bank statements showing huge transfers to a notary public made by Victoria 2 weeks before Arthur's death. It was all there. The cold, irrefutable proof of fraud. "My God," whispered Dr. Corbin, picking up the papers. He had known Arthur for 20 years. The signature on the second will, it was an almost perfect forgery. She didn't inherit everything. She stole it. The beep in Victoria's office was shrill, an alarm she never expected to hear. Flashing red on the security screen was the alert. "Access granted. A laboratory. Master key." Ice flowed through her veins. Maria, the traitor. They weren't just in the greenhouse, they were in the tomb of her secrets. All panic evaporated, replaced by a cold, murderous fury. If those documents were found, it was all over. The fortune, the house, her freedom. She would not go to prison. She would not be destroyed by some filthy gardener and a treacherous maid. With quick, precise movements, she opened another program. The mansion's integrated security system. She clicked on the icon for the laboratory wing. A floor plan appeared. With one command, she activated the emergency lockdown protocol. In the service corridors and at the greenhouse exits, hidden titanium shutters descended from the ceilings with a heavy metallic clang, sealing every way out. They were trapped. Next, she returned to the climate control screen. The temperature in the greenhouse was already dangerously high. It wasn't enough. She typed a new command, using an admin-level access code. "Initiate thermal sterilization protocol." The system asked for confirmation of the extreme action. Target temperature, 140 degrees Fahrenheit. Oxygen level, reduced. It was a protocol to purge pests between plantings. It was lethal to any form of life. She confirmed. In the lab, a red emergency light began to flash above the door. Ilara and Dr. Corbin looked up, horror dawning on their faces as they heard the final metallic sound of the security shutters closing. They rushed to the door, but it wouldn't budge. They looked at the status monitor beside it. The temperature in the greenhouse was climbing rapidly, 113, 115, 117 degrees. The air was becoming unbreathable. They weren't just trapped anymore. They were being cooked alive. The heat was a living thing, pressing in from all sides. The thin, heavy air burned their lungs. On the monitor, the greenhouse temperature climbed mercilessly, 125, 127 degrees. "We're going to die in here," gasped Dr. Corbin, leaning against the lab's cool wall, his face pale. The red emergency light pulsed, painting the scene in nightmarish hues. Ilara didn't answer. Her mind was racing, sifting through years of knowledge, searching for an escape where there was only steel and glass. Her eyes swept over the equipment, the reagents, and landed on a tall metal cylinder tucked in a corner. The label read, "Liquid nitrogen." A dangerous, desperate idea began to form. "Doctor, help me!" she yelled, her voice hoarse. "We need to get this cylinder to the greenhouse door. Now!" Together, they wrestled the heavy cylinder down the service corridor, the metal scraping against the floor. The greenhouse door was now like the door of a furnace. Heat radiated from it. "Stand back," Ilara commanded. With a strength born of pure survival instinct, she cranked open the main valve. A hissing white jet of frigid vapor exploded from the nozzle. The liquid nitrogen, at 320 degrees Fahrenheit, slammed into the tempered glass of the greenhouse door. The thermal shock was instant and violent. Superheated air on one side, extreme cold on the other. The glass groaned, then cracked. A spiderweb of fissures spread across its surface in a split second, and then, with a deafening implosion, the glass panel shattered into 1,000,000 tiny cubes, which cascaded inward like a glittering waterfall. A wave of nearly unbreathable air hit them, but the way was clear. With the will's document stuffed under her shirt and the vial of newly created antidote in her pocket, Ilara dove through the opening, Dr. Corbin right behind her. They were bruised, coughing, but they were alive, and they were furious. Meanwhile, in the grand ballroom, the auction was about to begin. The atmosphere was one of luxury and anticipation. Journalists readied their cameras. Millionaire collectors from around the world whispered in their seats. On stage, under the soft glow of a spotlight, Victoria approached the podium. She wore an elegant, somber black dress. Her face was perfectly made up to feign a dignified grief. Behind her, a giant screen displayed a majestic image of the Black Dragon in its glory days. The ambient music faded to silence. "Friends, collectors, lovers of beauty," Victoria began, her voice thick with rehearsed emotion. "It is with a heavy heart that I address you today. Nature in its beauty can also be incredibly cruel." She paused dramatically, looking out at the audience with teary eyes. "Our beloved Black Dragon fell victim to a sudden and devastating illness. Despite all our efforts, bringing in the very best specialists, we lost her this afternoon." A murmur of shock and disappointment rippled through the crowd. "Tonight, I had intended to celebrate the pinnacle of my late husband's legacy. Instead, I ask you to join me in a moment of silence, to mourn the loss of this irreplaceable masterpiece of lies." The word cut through the ballroom silence. It wasn't a shout, but it was spoken with such icy clarity that every head turned toward the entrance. There, standing, was Ilara. Covered in soot, her hair a mess, a cut on her arm, she looked like an apparition from a battlefield. Beside her stood Dr. Corbin, pale but resolute, and in her hands, Ilara held the Black Dragon. Not the withered, dying flower, but a vision of dark velvet, alive, vibrant, its petals open like defiant wings. The silence that followed was absolute, thick, electric. Victoria froze on the stage, the blood draining from her face. It was impossible. She had killed them. She had destroyed it all. Security guards started moving toward Ilara, but Dr. Corbin held up a hand. "Stop!" His normally calm voice boomed with unquestionable authority. This woman whom Mrs. Davenport tried to murder less than an hour ago is not just a gardener. She is Dr. Ilara Vance, one of the most brilliant minds in modern botany. And she didn't just save this flower, she uncovered the truth. He walked to the stage, took a microphone, and handed it to Ilara. Victoria was paralyzed, a statue of terror. Ilara ascended the steps slowly, each footfall echoing in the dead silence. She placed the orchid on the podium, a living, breathing trophy. She didn't look at Victoria. She looked at the audience, at the cameras. Victoria didn't lie about everything, Ilara said, her steady voice captured by every microphone. There was indeed a devastating disease in this house, but it wasn't a fungus. It was greed. She pulled the envelope with the documents from under her shirt. Victoria Davenport told you she inherited her husband's legacy. The truth is, she stole it. In her hand, she held a small USB drive. With terrifying calm, she plugged it into a laptop on the podium, the same one controlling the large screen. The memorial image of the orchid vanished. In its place, two documents appeared, side by side, magnified for all to see. On the left, Ilara said, her voice narrating the public execution, the official will of Arthur Davenport, leaving everything to his wife. On the right, the true will, which we discovered in his laboratory, leaving the bulk of his fortune to scientific research and charitable foundations. She zoomed in on the signatures. And here, the proof of the fraud. A nearly perfect forgery. The image changed. A bank statement. And here, the transfer of $200,000 to the notary who authenticated the fraud 1 week before Arthur's death. Each new image was another nail in Victoria's coffin. The silence in the ballroom was so profound you could hear the hum of electronic equipment. The camera flashes began to pop, a storm of light on Victoria's pale, shocked face. The evidence wasn't just strong. It was irrefutable, and it was being broadcast live to the entire world. The silence in the ballroom was a weapon. Every passing second was a blow against Victoria's armor. The evidence projected on the screen behind her wasn't just an accusation. It was her social epitaph, written in block letters for the world to read. The first sound to break the spell was a strangled sob from Victoria herself. Her eyes, once cold and calculating, were now pools of panic. She looked at the faces in the crowd, searching for an ally, a friend, an accomplice. But she found only cold, curious eyes, hungry for the scandal. The mask of dignity cracked, then shattered. "It's a lie!" she shrieked, her voice high-pitched, unrecognizable. "It's all fabricated. This nobody, this vagrant, she broke into my house, forged these papers. She's trying to destroy me." The accusation was so absurd, so pathetic in the face of the concrete evidence, that it drew the first audible reaction from the audience. A low, cruel laugh from an oil tycoon who, an hour earlier, had kissed her hand. That laugh broke her. Denial turned to rage. "Security!" she screamed, pointing a trembling finger at Ilara. "Get this criminal out of here! Arrest her!" But the security guards didn't move. They looked to their chief, a sturdy man near the stage, and he simply shook his head, a minimal gesture that sealed Victoria's fate. Her authority had evaporated. She was no longer the boss. She was just the woman on stage, at the center of the disaster. The murmurs in the audience grew into a loud buzz. "The signature, it's clearly forged," a lawyer told his wife. "And the bank transfers, how stupid," she replied. The event's primary sponsor, a Swiss banker, was already on his phone, speaking in hurried German, cancelling contracts, severing ties. The social sanction was like a virus, spreading through the room, instant and lethal. Friends of decades now averted their gaze. Rivals smiled discreetly. The court of high society had delivered its verdict. Guilty. Suddenly, a man in a grey suit stood up in the front row. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said in a calm, commanding voice that silenced the room, "my name is Mr. Peterson, and I am the attorney for the estate of Arthur Davenport and the legal representative of the research fund he intended to establish. All eyes turned to him. For months we have had suspicions about the validity of the will presented by Mrs. Davenport, but we lacked proof. Now we have it. He looked directly at Victoria, his gaze pure ice. On behalf of the true legacy of Arthur Davenport, I declare this charade is over, and I am informing you that all appropriate legal actions will be taken immediately. It was the final blow. The legal validation of her fall. Victoria's rage imploded, giving way to pure fear. No, you can't do this, she stammered, backing away on the stage, tripping over a cable. It was mine. I deserved it. I took care of him. It was at that moment that the double doors at the back of the ballroom swung open. 2 uniformed police officers, accompanied by a detective in a suit, entered. They didn't run. They walked with a deliberate calm, an inevitable force that parted the sea of tuxedos and silk gowns. The detective held a document in his hand. He walked onto the stage, ignoring the cameras, ignoring the chaos. He stopped in front of Victoria. "Victoria Davenport?" he asked, his voice professional, devoid of emotion. She just stared at him, her mouth agape, unable to form words. "You are under arrest on suspicion of fraud, forgery, and the attempted murder of Ilara Vance and Miles Corbin." He motioned to the officers. The sound that followed was small, but it echoed through the hall like a gunshot, the metallic click of handcuffs closing around Victoria's wrists. The woman who, minutes before, had been the center of a universe of wealth and power, was now just a prisoner. The designer black dress suddenly looked like a cheap costume. The jewels around her neck, a noose of guilt. She didn't fight anymore. She just let herself be led away. Her head bowed. The walk of shame began. The same audience that would have applauded her now watched in silence, their cell phones raised, recording her every step. The camera flashes were merciless, machine-gunning her face, which was disfigured by tears and humiliation. She was an animal on display, her downfall the greatest spectacle of the night. As she passed the main table, she looked up and saw Maria, the housekeeper, standing and watching her. There was no triumph in Maria's eyes, only a deep sadness and the relief of justice. When the door closed behind Victoria and the police, a power vacuum was left in the ballroom. And then, slowly, like the sun rising after a storm, all eyes turned back to the stage, to Ilara. She wasn't smiling. She stood quietly beside the black dragon, whose dark, velvety beauty seemed even deeper and more meaningful now. She had faced humiliation, sabotage, and death, and she had won not with weapons, but with knowledge, not with hatred, but with truth. The Swiss banker was the first to move. He walked to the stage and extended his hand to her. "Dr. Vance," he said, "the world needs more people like you." In moments she was surrounded, not by gawkers, but by admirers. The silence was broken, not by gossip, but by a wave of applause. It started with a few people, and then it grew, filling the room. A standing ovation, a resounding acknowledgement of her courage, her dignity, and her overwhelming victory. Victoria's public downfall was complete. Ilara's public restoration was just beginning. The wave of applause washed over Ilara, a physical force that made her take a step back. For a moment, the sound was overwhelming, a cacophony of clapping hands that seemed to come from every direction. But then, through the noise, she started to see the faces. They weren't an anonymous crowd. They were individuals, women with tears in their eyes, men nodding in respect, young people with their phones held high, not to record a scandal, but to capture the image of a hero. The applause wasn't for Victoria's fall. It was for Ilara's rise. It was a collective apology, an acknowledgement of her strength, a celebration of truth. The weight she had been carrying on her shoulders, the grief for her father, the years of struggle, the crushing humiliation of that morning, began to dissolve. Dr. Corbin placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, his eyes shining with pride. "They're applauding the right person, my dear," he said, his voice loud enough to be heard over the sound. "They're applauding science, integrity, Mr. Peterson, the estate's attorney, came onto the stage, his serious expression replaced by a genuine smile. He extended his hand to Elara. "Dr. Vance," he said, emphasizing the title, "on behalf of the Arthur Davenport Research Fund, which as of tomorrow will be officially established, I don't know how to thank you. Mr. Davenport would have been in awe of your brilliance and courage. Consider the fund your ally. Any research, any project you wish to pursue will have our full and unrestricted financial support." The offer was dizzying, a promise of a future free from the constraints of necessity. As the applause finally subsided, people began to approach the stage, forming a line to speak with her. The first was the Swiss banker, the same one who had cancelled Victoria's sponsorship. "Dr. Vance, my name is Jean-Pierre Dubois," he said with a thick accent. "My bank sponsors the chair of advanced botany at the University of Geneva. The position is currently open. If you are interested, it is yours." Before Elara could process the offer, an elegant woman, the director of the New York Botanical Garden, introduced herself. "Elara, what an honor. We need you. As our new director of research, you would have carte blanche." The offers came one after another. An auction, not for a flower, but for her mind, for her truth. Amid the swirl of important faces, she saw Maria, the housekeeper, standing shyly near the stage steps. Elara excused herself from the people around her and walked over to her. The crowd parted respectfully to let her pass. The two women looked at each other for a moment, a universe of understanding passing between them. They didn't need many words. Maria took Elara's hand in hers, the work-roughened hands enveloping the hands that had just rewritten the history of that house. "Thank you," Maria whispered, her eyes full of tears. "For him, for Mr. Arthur, and for all of us. We did this together," Elara replied, her voice thick with emotion. In that handshake, the victory became real. It was a shared victory, a restoration of dignity, not just for her, but for everyone who had been diminished by Victoria's arrogance. When she returned to the center of the stage, the journalists surrounded her. But the energy had changed. The questions weren't about the scandal. They were about her. "Dr. Vance, can you tell us more about your research on phomopsis? What will be your next step? How do you feel?" Elara looked at the black dragon, there beside her, its dark petals drinking in the light from the spotlights. She remembered the morning, standing on the street covered in mud, feeling invisible, worthless. Now she was at the center of the world, and everyone wanted to hear her voice. She took the microphone, and an expectant silence fell over the room once more. "I feel like a plant that has finally found the sun," she said, her voice clear and steady. "For a long time, I was in the shadows, but today, I remembered what my father taught me. No lie can ever choke a root that's truly strong, and now I'm ready to grow." 1 year later, morning sunlight flooded the glass walls of the Arthur Davenport Botanical Research Institute. The mansion's old ballroom, the stage for humiliation and vindication, had been demolished. In its place now stood a state-of-the-art research greenhouse, a center of innovation and life that honored the true legacy of its founder. At the center of it all was the Institute's director, Dr. Elara Vance. She walked among the rows of rare plants, wearing a crisp white lab coat, her posture erect, her expression serene. A team of young scientists followed her, absorbing her every word, her every instruction. She was no longer the woman struggling to survive. She was the woman who led, who taught, who inspired. The world now saw what her father had always known, the strength that came from her roots. Her office was spacious, with a full glass wall overlooking the experimental garden. On her mahogany desk, between a digital microscope and stacks of scientific journals, rested a tablet. A news article from a legal journal was open on the screen. The headline was short, objective. "Victoria Davenport sentenced to 18 years in prison for fraud and attempted murder. Former socialite loses all assets." Elara read the sentence without emotion. There was no joy, no hatred, just the final punctuation on a dark chapter. Victoria was no longer a presence in her life. She was just a distant memory, a reminder of how dishonest human soil could be. She closed the article and opened a paper on cellular regeneration in orchids. The past was settled. The future was here, growing all around her. At the end of the day, Ilara went to her private garden, a small terrace attached to her office. There, in a simple ceramic pot, grew a healthy shoot of the black dragon, a clone she had cultivated herself. To care for it, she didn't use the sophisticated tools from the lab. She took an object from a velvet case on her shelf, her father's small silver trowel. The worn metal fit perfectly in her hand. As she loosened the rich dark earth around the small plant, she smiled. The earth was honest. It gave back what you planted, and Ilara, after a long and harsh season, was finally harvesting the flowers she had always deserved. Justice, at last, had bloomed. The story of Ilara and Victoria is a powerful reminder that true dignity can't be bought, and arrogance is just a mask for weakness. How often, in our own lives, do we judge a book by its cover? How often is a person's worth overlooked because of the clothes they wear, their background, or the job they do? The mud that Victoria threw on Ilara wasn't just dirt, it was contempt, it was prejudice. But the truth, like a strong root, always finds its way to the light. Now we want to hear from you. What's your story? Have you ever been underestimated or witnessed someone brilliant being treated unfairly, only to see them make a spectacular comeback? Leave your story in the comments. Your story matters, and it inspires. If you believe that justice should always bloom, subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. We have more stories like this, where inner strength overcomes outer cruelty. Until next time.